My name is Chris Hughes, and this is the American Business Show. We join business owners to take a close look at what made their businesses prosper and what to look out for in the marketplace today. If you're interested in how to get started or how to keep going, this show is a resource for you. Hello, and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to talk to Gary Weinman of American Business Intermediaries. Gary has accumulated over 30 years of experience in finance, management, and mergers and acquisitions. So without further ado, here's Gary. Gary, can you explain what it is that American Business Intermediaries does?
Well, Chris, we do a lot of little things, a whole bunch of little things. But in the end, the bottom line is we help businesses, small business owners get their business sold. Now, sometimes it might take years of guiding a client and preparing the business for sale, and sometimes it's just a matter of gathering information that they have readily available and getting it on the market and getting it sold. But we really just want to help people get their business sold.
How did you decide to start this business?
Well, I can't say that I went out and developed a business plan and to do this. Honestly, I stumbled in it in the sense that I was out looking for an acquisition of my own. I had just sold a manufacturing company. In fact, I had bought and sold several small businesses here in town. And I just sold my last company, and I went out to look for a new company. And every business that I looked at was just very poorly represented in the market by either their M&A advisor or their business broker. And there were actually a couple of pretty good businesses there, but they would never sell the way they were packaged. They just had really poor representation in the market. So my background is very specifically in acquisitions for many, many years. I started in 1990, and when I left banking and joined a large public company, international company, to do acquisitions around the country. And that's where it started. And then after that, I started doing acquisitions on my own for myself. And then, so I was involved in acquisitions since about 1990. I have a very good background there. I understand it, and I thought that there were some business owners that could benefit by my knowledge. And so I decided to start doing that, representing business owners and trying to get their businesses sold.
Why do business owners choose to use American Business Intermediaries over other business brokers?
Chris, I believe it's because we have verifiable success in the market. If you talk to local banking communities, CPAs, transaction lawyers, and even clients, you'll find a lot of successes out there. And that's kind of unique in a world that over 80% of businesses that get listed by a business broker never actually sell. Now, we have a lot better success than that. Now, part of it is because we're selective. We want to make sure that we can be successful before we pick it up. And then secondly, it's just our processes and what we do. We just do things differently. If we look at everything from a buyer's perspective, and if it doesn't make sense for a buyer, chances are we're not going to be successful at getting it sold. And then it's just the technical aspects of trying to put it on the market and get it done. There's a lot involved there, and very few people in our industry have any buy-side experience, so they really don't know what their buy-side counterparts are looking for. Well, we do. I've worked on the buy-side for many, many years. Anyway, the other reasons, it sounds silly, but professionalism. This is an industry that is kind of lacking in professionalism. If you've ever talked to folks in the industry, it's a real sore spot for me. Ultimately, clients want to be represented by people that will not embarrass them, and they won't misstate facts, and they'll just be a good representative of them. And I think a lot of my clients pick me because they've spoken to some of the competition, and they know that we'll never embarrass them.
So if you're telling me 80% of businesses basically are unable to sell, is that correct?
That's true, where they have broker representation, that's right.
What are business owners doing wrong? What could they be doing better to even bring a viable product to the marketplace in order to sell the business?
Well, I think it's a twofold problem, specifically if you're going through the broker community. Number one is the business is not prepared to sell. They've not planned to do the exit. They don't have the information they need to do an exit. And they certainly don't have the information to satisfy a buyer that's looking. So that preparation is key. The other problem is, for the most part, they're going through a broker community that operates very similarly to the real estate profession, where the goal is you list as many businesses as you possibly can, and you post them, hopefully to get lucky. So the model is post, do a whole bunch of them, and you represent none of them well. It's just a poor model for this industry, because the sale of a business is a very complex sale, even for the smallest of businesses. And where you have a broker that might have 10 or 15 listings out there, for a single broker, I can assure you that you are not well represented. There's not enough time in the day to represent you well.
So I think if we were to think about it, though, most business owners, to some capacity, imagine the selling of their business as part of their retirement plan, right? They think that's part of their total net worth, and they plan on one day exiting the business. What do these owners need to be doing? How do they need to be thinking if that's part of their game plan?
Well, it's actually kind of ironic, and I've thought about this for years and years and years, is that people spend an enormous amount of time trying to manage their passive investments, but the thing that they have the most control of, they don't plan for at all, and that's their business. So in my mind, the second that you go in the business, just like if you were buying a stock or some passive investment, you need to have a plan on how you're going to exit that. And if you don't, most likely you're not going to do it in a fashion that you ever anticipated. So you have to plan on that exit. Even if it's a 20-year exit or 30-year exit, you need to plan on it, because that's the only way to maximize the value of that investment. And that's just not an investment of your money. That's an investment of your time, of your life.
If you taught a class on starting a business, what would your first lesson be about?
Well, Chris, that's the easiest question you've asked so far. You said specifically start a business. So I can tell you my first lesson would be about why you should not start a business.
Okay. Elaborate on that.
Well, I've done both startups and acquisitions. And although I did have one very successful startup, a purchase just puts you so much further down the road and takes so much risk out of the equation of going to business for yourself. Yes, they are more difficult on the front end and getting into it, but on the back end, your opportunity is just so much greater. And your risks are less if you can get into a business. So my recommendation would be to do a purchase if you have the opportunity. Now, if there's nothing that out there in the area where you want to do a startup, then maybe so. But I would recommend doing an acquisition over a startup any day of the week. Now, my second one, the second lesson that is, would be related to, if you decide you're going to do that startup, would be related to estimating the costs and timeframes relative to the success of doing a startup. I've yet to meet anyone that's even come close to estimating that properly, including myself, and I was in the acquisition business. My recommendation would be, whatever you come up with in terms of dollars required to get you to positive cash flow and the time frame of which that's going to take you, double those. If it still makes sense as an investment to do it of your time and your money, then do it. If it doesn't, don't. Go find an acquisition.
My last question for you is this. I'm seeing in the marketplace an attempt to almost commoditize the M&A industry, right? The same way they've done with loans, where it's no longer an individual, originator talking to the individual anymore. Everything's done electronically. I see the same thing happening with the M&A industry. Is that going to work? Is that going to be successful, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've noticed it too, Chris, and it really kind of amazes me because I just think there's absolutely no way that will ever be to the benefit of a business owner trying to sell. It's too nuanced. There's too much information required, and it's so different from deal to deal that you couldn't possibly digitize that in a way that would be useful to a buyer. Certainly not at a value level if you're trying to extract, the highest value possible of your business. You're just not going to be able to do that. It's truly a selling process, but it's also an analysis process that you're just not going to get done over the internet. You're just not going to do that successfully. That doesn't mean there won't be some that sell. It just means there's going to be very few that sell for anywhere near maximum value.
Is this company your final professional stop, or do you imagine yourself doing something different in the future?
No. This is my final stop professionally, and I don't look at it as being final, in that I believe that what I offer is so incredibly unique in the Central and South Texas markets that I can't imagine doing anything else. I mean, what I do is so unique compared to everyone else in the industry. No, this is what I'll be doing until I'm finished, for sure.
Do you think there's value in having a mentor? And if so, how would someone go about getting a mentor? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can tell you that it was a missed opportunity for me. I did not go out as a young professional seeking a mentor, and that was a big mistake. So I would certainly recommend, if you're a young professional out there, that you get out there and you find a mentor, someone that you would like to be like professionally, but that also shares your same spiritual, moral values. I just think that's so important. If you do that, you're going to be way ahead of your peers in your career path if you can pick a mentor that can help you and can guide you. However, for me, I didn't have a mentor, but I had several people that influenced me that I benefited from. One in the area of competency that was just absolutely unbelievable. I worked for her 2 years. She was a chief financial officer of a bank, and she hired me to be the controller of the bank. And after a couple of years, she left. I eventually replaced her at the bank and at the bank holding company as chief financial officer. I can tell you, in that 2-year period that I worked for her, I learned more in that 2-year period than any 10-year period of my professional career, hands down. In fact, I would say that experience was kind of the keystone of what I'm able to do today. And that 2 years was invaluable. So you got to find that in someone. And hopefully it's also not just a kind of a competency mentor, but kind of a professional career mentor that you can work for longer than 2 years.
Great conversation with Gary. Really, the biggest piece of advice that I took away from this conversation was that a business owner needs to have their exit strategy in mind. They need to know how they're going to exit the business, and they need to start preparing for that ahead of time. He said that 80% of businesses that go to market don't actually end up selling. That number is shockingly high to me. I think the assumption is, as a business owner, when the time's right, you'll be able to sell. But I think if we're not bringing the right information to the table, we're not presenting ourselves correctly, it's going to be hard to sell the business. So really the biggest takeaway is that just have the end in mind and start preparing for that. So whenever the time comes, you present well, you give the buyer the correct information, you make your company a viable option for them to purchase. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day. See you next time.